moving on to entrenchment. The US Constitution is also entrenched, okay? Now, just to make a comparison to the UK Constitution, we know that the UK Constitution is unentrenched, which means that there are no mechanisms in place in the UK to safeguard the Constitution from a short-term amendment, okay? And we know that directly links to the doctrine of parliamentary sovereignty, okay? The fact that future parliaments, the fact that Parliament cannot bind its successors and it cannot be bound by its predecessors, okay? And that it can make, repeal, and amend any laws through a simple act of Parliament, okay? In contrast then, the US Constitution is entrenched, okay? Which means that it's safeguarded from being changed too easily, okay? And the mechanism through which it is safeguarded from being changed too easily is through the complex amendment process, okay? We also know that the US Constitution has only been amended a total of 27 times since the passing of these Bill of Rights in 1791, okay? So in total there have been 27 amendments to the US Constitution, okay, including these first 10 amendments, all right? Which basically means, in effect, because the 18th and the 21st Amendment cancel each other out, so the 18th Amendment, which basically prohibited the sort of production of alcohol, okay, the 21st Amendment essentially repealed the 18th Amendment. So those two amendments, they cancel each other out, okay? One, the 18th was passed in 1919, and the 21st repealed the 18th Amendment in 1933. So those two cancel each other out, which is why we say that in practice, okay, only 15 amendments really have been, are in practice exercised since 1791, okay, since the passing of these first 10 amendments. So now the process, the complex amendment process, okay, is a two-stage process, okay? The first stage is the proposal of the amendment, and the second stage is the ratification of that amendment. And one thing that I need to go over here is Congress, okay? Congress has two chambers. It has the House of Representatives, which has 435 members, and it has the Senate, which has 100 members. Now, the reason why the Senate has two chambers is primarily because of the fact that it needed to ensure that there was enough representation for the population of people within states, but it was also to ensure that smaller states were then not underrepresented because of the fact that they had small populations, okay? So as we know, the Senate has 100 senators, okay? Each state, because there's 50 states in the USA, each state therefore elects 2 senators, okay? The House of Representatives, however, the 435 members across the 50 states, that is decided through sort of the proportion of the population. So, a larger state, for example, with a larger population, will elect more members to the House of Representatives, okay? So, for example, a state like California, I think approximately has 53 members elected to the House of Representatives, whereas smaller states such as Delaware, Montana, Rhode Island, for example, they have 1 or 2 members elected to the House of Representatives, okay? So Senate, equal representation across all 50 states, 2 senators elected per state, each of the 50 states, which makes up 100 senators. House of Representatives, okay, it elects members, okay, according to the proportion of their respective populations, all right? And that is to ensure that the smaller states are not underrepresented, okay? So that at least they have those 2 senators guaranteed to represent their views on a sort of national national scale, okay, of sort of federal governance. So stage one of the process, okay? So stage one, like I said, is a proposal stage. Stage two is a ratification stage. Now, stage one, the proposal of the amendment, okay, is by 2/3 of Congress, okay, which means each chamber of Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate, 2/3 of each of those chambers need to pass a proposal of the amendment, okay? So 2/3 of the Senate and 2/3 of the House of Representatives need to vote on the amendment for it to go to the ratification stage, okay? So it's proposal of amendment by 2/3 of each chamber of Congress or by a national convention called by Congress at the request of 2/3 of the state legislatures, which in other words means that as there's a federal system of government operating in the USA, each state has a legislature. So if 2/3 of the state legislatures, which I think is 34, call a national convention, they can therefore push through the proposal of an amendment, okay? Now the second stage is the ratification of that amendment, and that is by 3/4 of the state legislatures, which is 38 out of the 50, or by 3/4 of the state conventions, okay? Now the reason why this process is so complex and so difficult to achieve is primarily because of the fact that the founding fathers, okay, of the US Constitution, they wanted to prevent the US Constitution from being changed too easily, okay, particularly by a centralized authority, okay, which they feared from when the British ruled them, from when the 13 colonies were ruled from Parliament, UK Parliament, directly, okay, and they also didn't want a particular political party to push through amendments too easily, okay, in their own self-interest. I hope that's made things clear, year 13.